We are going to talk about passive cooling techniques in traditional technologies and a historical perspective, because traditional technologies have been using passive cooling methods for, for thousands of years. So what we term as passive cooling, basically dwellings that use sun's energy to heat or cool have been constructed for thousands of years. Early humans knew the advantage of finding a cave or placing a wall opening away from the sun's path to facilitate cooling during summer months. They also discovered unique ability of certain materials to insulate and prevent solar heat from entering the interior space. Solar architecture is called passive solar, and it does not involve the use of electrical or mechanical devices. When we are able to cool, use the natural resources, or we are able to use the natural methods without any input of artificial devices, then we term that as solar architecture. Heat produced by sun causes air movements that can be predictable in design spaces. They can be directed, they can be moved around at our will, or if they are designed, if the spaces are designed correctly. So basic response to solar heat leads to design elements, choice of materials, and placements that can provide heating or cooling effect. Passive cooling system works by reducing unwanted heat during the day by producing non-mechanical ventilation systems, exchanging warm air, interior air for cooler exterior air wherever possible, also storing coolness of the night to moderate warm daytime temperatures. The most simple form, or the simplest possible form of this cooling system includes, as we have all seen, like overhangs or shading devices on south-facing windows, shading trees, thermal masks, and cross ventilation. We will explore what are the other methods that help us go beyond these very basic tools. So if we try to understand the methods, the techniques that use natural process of heat dissipation and modulation without the use of energies, there are two aspects here. First is preventive. Preventive techniques would mean that we try to stop the sun's energy or minimize or optimize the sun's energy from heating the spaces of buildings or the architectural environment. The other is modulation and heat dissipation. So whatever heat that has been absorbed by the building or the spaces, how to dissipate it, how to minimize it, and how to make the environment more comfortable. One of the methods is the microclimate and site design. As students, you must have all studied and understood the concepts of climatology, how the temperature and the wind direction and the solar movement has impact on the planning. So definite cooling approaches by taking into account the local climate can be selected and applied to prevent overheating through the envelope of the building. The envelope of the building or the exterior, which consists of walls all around and the roof, are the most important entities. Most suitable location of the building can be arrived at after a detailed study and analysis of solar movements and wind direction during different seasons. So this is where a site-specific design is created. Then the other part, the shading systems. These can effectively reduce the solar heat gain by shading both opaque. So you have opaque walls or the building structure, and you also have transparent surfaces of building envelope, which basically consists of opening and windows. So here we are talking of basically preventive techniques, which also would include the form of the building. So orientation of the building can prevent overheating, and a flat horizontal plan would increase the effectiveness of cross ventilation. Heavy masonry walls, small external windows, and a north-south orientation minimizes the heat gain. Then, of course, there is the thermal insulation of the building envelope that considerably decreases the heat transfer by radiation through the facades. Roofs contribute almost 60% of the heat load, and insulation as well as roof form. So even certain kind of roof forms can also minimize the sum. For instance, if there is a dome or if there is a sloping roof on one side, so that can optimize the heat gains from the roof, apart from, of course, thermal insulation. Techniques for modulation and heat dissipation. Natural ventilation, we have all experienced it, we all understand. The process for removing heat to provide cooling comfort to the occupants and also cool the building places. We all have understood or experienced the process of cross ventilation, which facilitates passage of air through the space and reduce the heat in the spaces. Inlet and outlet openings on opposite side and show movement of air through the spaces, resulting in removal of hot air. Sizing and placement of the inlet and outlet determine the direction and velocity of the cross ventilation. There are also ways, which is also called stack ventilation. These are certain ways, as we all understand, the fundamental principle, physics principle, that warm air rises and cool air rushes in to replace it. So principle of stack ventilation uses the property of air by facilitating movement through spaces by providing openings on lower levels and outlets located towards the higher level. The graphical representation. We will study this concept of wind catcher, or what is called Malkaf. These are prevalent in Middle East, predominantly in Iran and Iraq area, where an opening is created at a higher level in the windward direction. It's basically trying to trap the wind into the space and draw it into the interior of the space, then create openings at the higher level. So warm air rises and exits through openings located near the ceiling, and cooler air replaces the rising warm air. So this also ensures a continuous air change and also a principle of what we call stack ventilation. Another heat dissipation technique, that is called night flushing. In this, the building envelope is kept closed during the day and the building thermal mass acts as heat sink. Heat sink is something, which you keep it in an area and it absorbs heats and retain it. As heat sink and absorb heat gain from the occupant, equipment, solar radiation, and conduction through walls, roof, and ceiling. At night, the night temperature is always lower than the day temperature because when there is no sun, then this temperature is bound to be lower. So at night, when the outside air is cooler and envelope is open, allowing cooler outside air to pass through the spaces so that the stored heat can be dissipated by convection, resulting in reduction of the temperature of the indoor air and building thermal mass, allowing convective, conductive, and radiant. I mean, there are three. I'm sure we'll all remember the basic physics. The three ways that the heat can be transmitted: heat through convection, through conduction, and radiation. So whenever we are able to exchange heat through these three methods, the cooling takes place during the day. Night flushing is more effective in dry climates, but may cause high indoor humidity in humid areas. One of the examples that we've seen some buildings, like for instance, in a tall and narrow courtyard with a fountain spouting some very thin streams of water at the bottom and upper rooms opening onto it. Night flushing of the courtyard happens automatically as the night air cools. Evaporative cooling cools it further and can be used to create drafts and change the air during the day. Windows can be left open round the clock into the courtyard. Other heat dissipation techniques, radiative cooling. Like you understand, all objects emit and absorb radiant energy. An object cools it if the net flow is outwards. If the flow of heat energy is outwards, the object will be cooled. And if the heat energy is, of course, inwards, the object will get heated up. So we have to devise ways by which the net flow is outward. That means we radiate energy or radiate heat from the buildings. Like I mentioned earlier, the roof areas are the largest surfaces in a building and can act as net flow radiators at night, as the radiation from the clear sky is less than the radiation emitted from the building. Since there is no sun during night, the sun after past sunset, the radiation from the sun reduces considerably, and there is only radiation from the emitted from the building. So that concept of net flow outward starts working and results in cooling of the spaces. Direct radiant cooling. Roof of the building acts as heat sink and absorbs the daily internal load, being the largest surface area of the building exposed to the night sky. It removes heat from the building by radiant heat transfer in the sky and cools the building structure. Indirect radiant cooling. This involves creation of a plenum between the roof of the building and radiator surface. Air is drawn into the building through the plenum, cooled from the radiator, and cools the mass of the building. Evaporation causes cooling. As you all understood that whenever there is a high temperature, the evaporation of water, from whichever surface the water evaporates, the surface becomes cool. So this principle has been very effectively used to cool buildings and spaces in most traditional architecture in hot and dry climates. Also increases relative humidity, hence less effective in human environment. That is why in coastal areas, you normally do not have so many things, so many elements of evaporative cooling. The elements or the Components of architecture that use are indoor and outdoor pools, water channels, fountains, and cascades. These are some of the elements utilized not only for climate control, but also they also end up becoming aesthetic and architectural features in some of the traditional structures. There's another concept of earth coupling. Moderate and consistent, the earth temperature is invariably lower than the ambient ground surface temperature. So moderate and consistent temperature of the soil acts as a heat sink. I mean, it absorbs heat, but below a certain level, the temperature is either constant or consistent, and it acts as a heat sink to cool the buildings through conduction, and is most effective when the earth temperature are cooler than the ambient temperature in the warm climates. Direct cooling. This phenomena occurs when the building uses earth as a buffer for walls. Earth acts as a heat sink and can effectively reduce the heat transfer by acting as an insulating agent. Indirect coupling. An earth duct is coupled with the building as a buried tube that acts as an avenue for supply air to travel through before entering the building. The air is cooled by conductive heat transfer between the ducts and the surrounding soil. This requires long ducts and a lower surrounding earth temperature, along with it, sometimes with a fan, to draw the air into the building and spaces. Some of these examples or some of these techniques have been also used in some of the contemporary structures in parts of northern climates. A diagrammatic representation. So the basement, which is partly below the ground. So the earth acts as a heat sink. So I mean, we all say that the basements are cool. I mean, they are cool because of this. There is this concept of what is called canal. Canal is actually a water channel, very prevalent in the Middle Eastern region, which actually carries water from one point to the other. So basically, these are underground canals linking various water sources. So hot air can be drawn into these canals. The same air is fed into the basement or the lower ground or the built-up spaces below the ground, and then the wind tower, as we have seen earlier, this can exit through the wind tower on top. Various examples of Indian courtyard house. Courtyard. Professor Bhupinder mentioned the concept of all parts of northern India, which includes Gujarat and of course Rajasthan. The slide on the right side is actually a Mughal palace, I think in Agra or somewhere, which also uses the principle of a courtyard. So basically, the courtyards are also the source of lighting during the daytime. And in summer, since the natural air has a tendency to rise up, the courtyard acts as a funnel for the air as it warms and is constantly replaced by comparatively cooler air from surrounding. So as we can see in the little graphic along with the picture on the left, the cool air, the air is cooled also. So here we are seeing some examples where the various principles are integrated. We also have a water body here, and we have a pool of water. So which also, so we supplement by evaporative process. So the cool air pushes the warm air up and which exits from the top. There is also a little space here. courtyard. You might have heard or seen some visuals or seen some examples of very elaborate Havelis in Rajasthan. Now, in these Havelis, courtyards form, now, if this is an example of Haveli, courtyards form the central feature of a Haveli with a central open space surrounded by rooms and other habitable areas. So they are like enclosed from all sides. Apart from serving a function for all family activities revolving around the central space, the courtyard also serve as a light well and facilitate ventilation in the building in the hot and dry climates of the region. In hot and dry climate where cooling is necessary, buildings with eternal courtyard provide ample scope for airflow. Havelis also include a water body, a pool, a fountain, and a corner for sacred plants like tulsi in the central place, because these are also the family areas. If you look at this, there's a place, it's like a sit out. There's also a picture and an idol here. So it's also like a gathering place or the family, a lot of family activities take place in and around the central courtyard. I mean, it's like partially outdoor living because the climates, if it's a cool and comfortable environment, also private, also shaded from the outside. If you look at this building, there is very small apertures here. If you see, like the openings are very small, even the entrance is very small. The windows are also not so big. There is a projection on top, which also acts like a shading device. So it shades the wall of the level below. Also, there are like these balconies, or what is known as jharokas, which also form like an extension of the inside space, usable space. So people can use, the family can sit out, and especially in places like Rajasthan, this is part of Rajasthan, Shekhamti area, where women normally didn't step out much earlier. So they could observe the going around of a street or open area while still being in a private space on a balcony. The small windows ensured very little external air. Also, there is a lot of dust. So this whole thing acts like a complete ecosystem in itself. This is also a social space, which is also a space for gathering, I mean the family gathering or other family activities, and also facilitate climate control. Some more examples of Havelis. The one on the right hand side, you can see a fountain. So I think maybe this has been done up or something, but all the same, the fountain is there. It must have been the original fountain. Also, there were a proper and very well developed drainage system because it does rain once in a while. So the water, as you can see, there is water channel all around which collects water, and through a source or a system of pipes, it is stored either below this, because very often these Havelis were raised from the street level, providing extra space below, which could be also used for storing of water. So a traditional system of water conservation and rainwater harvesting was inbuilt into the planning and to the, so it also served as a water drainage, but it also stored water for use in dry months. As you can see, the very elaborate facade on the left hand side, left hand top corner, There's a painting of an elephant. Most of these pictures or the references are from an area called Shekhawati in Rajasthan, which is famous for its painted Havelis. Uh, Worth a visit. Very interesting area. So as you can see, the entrance is grand with a tall arch with colonnade, but yet the openings are very small, very tiny. So there are minimum scale of openings. But when we come inside the space, there is a open balcony all around on the first floor. There is a large central courtyard space. You can see a steps going up on the first level. So it's all predominantly an inward looking house or inward looking habitable space. Very common, I'm sure Professor Bhupinder would have found very similar references and striking similarities in Havelis in Punjab as well. There are similar ones also in parts of Gujarat. So basically a courtyard house which facilitated or made a climate control and also created a living environment around it. So the design and the planning inherently created cooling environments. Another element, I'm sure you must have all seen and maybe wondered sometime like, what is this supposed to be? So a jharokha or a balcony is not just a piece of ornamentation. It's also a projecting window from the wall in an upper story overlooking a street or a courtyard or any other open space. Mainly used in palace or haveli and sometimes in temples. They bring filtered light into the indoor space. In a dusty and warm climate, it brings channeled cool air through its opening and jalis. These openings are shaded with projections all around, with perforations allowing cooling of air and helping shading the building facades. If I just go back to my last, so similar examples of jharokas. There are jharokas, must be jharokas in this also, but this is the specific, only the part of jharoka. Some of the very elaborate buildings exist in Jaisalmer region. You rarely find an opening there which is not screened because the region of Jaisalmer has very strong dusty sandstorms around the year, and of course it's one of the highest temperature during the summer months. Another element which we find very common, which is like screens, lattice screens or jalis, again mainly used in palaces and houses with operable window, give shades and projection from the hot summer and also act as shading devices, mostly made of carved stone, but they could be also timber. Natural cooling is achieved by cutting off solar radiation, reducing absorption and slowing down the transmission of heat. Sunshades not only protect from sun radiation through the window, but sunshades also cast shadows on the walls. As you can see, the right hand side example, a very highly decorative and pleasing very pleasing look or the feel. It is casting shadows on the walls on the left, yet facilitating a reasonable view through. And you are still able to look through these openings. So the exterior view, and there is a certain amount of daylight. So you're not deprived of the view outside nor the daylight, but at the same time it acts as a screen and protects or limits the solar heat through radiation into the space. I'm sure most of us would have either not visited, definitely have heard of Hawa Mahal. If not, worth a visit. Very grand and elaborate structure in part of Pink City in Jaipur. Primarily, all windows, all openings are series of jharokas, as you can see in the design. If you go inside, I mean, when one goes to visit Hawa Mahal, you expect something perhaps more exciting and interesting inside. But inside is just a large space. So this entire facade is predominantly a sunscreen or a sun control design. It's called Hawa Mahal because of the principle of having narrow apertures. The breeze comes through it, yet it is controlled because the apertures are small, and you do have these projecting balconies on which one can stand and get a diverse, if not at least 180-degree view of the street or the surroundings. Examples of evaporative cooling. Uh, Ponds, tanks, and reservoirs in the outdoor structure of the building cause extensive evaporation, resulting in cooling of open space as well as structures, thereby impacting the microclimate of the area. Most Mughal buildings were surrounded with such large water bodies, not only for storage of water but also cooling effects. Also, most palaces in hot and dry climates of northern India included pools in the courtyards and tunnel spaces of the building. This is a very interesting example from the above one from Fatehpur Sikri, which has it's like a sitting pavilion. At the back, you can see the large structure of five-storied pagoda called Panch Mahal. So one doesn't need to stretch imagination that if this pond is filled with water, how pleasant sitting on the central podium would be. It is said that this was used for music performances and for musicians. So the earlier the ponds are example of water bodies that are still. They are like static. So the ponds are there. So you fill up the ponds or store water in them. Not only store, but they also act as evaporating surfaces. So adding to cooling of the environment and surroundings. However, some of the Mughal buildings also planned some very interesting moving water bodies or dynamic water features that facilitate cooling. So you had water channels, as you can see in the left. They were planned and well integrated into interior spaces as well as courtyards in the Mughal period building. The one on the left is actually part of Red Fort in Delhi, and they are like habitable or usable spaces on both sides. So the water channels are created. I mean, it's like a canal. It is kept on a slope, so the water flows through it, causing cooling effect. On the right hand side, there's an example of a fountain. There are big fountains other places, and this is, as you can see, is a covered hall. It's not even an open courtyard. There's a roof over it. So the fountain they create certain moisture in the air, and they also increase humidity. In certain dry climates, increase in humidity is also welcome, so it makes the spaces more comfortable. Also, the fountains add moisture to the air. There is one visual in the center where you are seeing a sloping wall, sloping slab with certain carving on it. These are called celestials. These were also introduced in India from Middle East. So the water is made to flow from the higher level to the lower level, and if you supply water from the top in whichever manner, manually or through an overhead tank, is bound to flow down. So it does two things. It, it maintains certain water pressure and forces the water to come from the fountain. If I supply the water from the top into the fountain, it will also make the jet into a kind of a spray. The inclined slab, the water flowing down not only increases the humidity of the, so it also helps in, so there is a, while the water is flowing down, so instead of flowing down through a duct or a pipe, it is made to flow down from a slab or a inclined stone slab with certain carvings. So the carvings, one can imagine that they also, but they also create high pressure and also create more evaporation even while the process is going on. So there is a multiple actions fountain and also creating additional scope for evaporation. They were cooling the surrounding. This feature is also in Red Fort, Delhi. It was not in use, but it is there. We talked about wind catcher towers. So the wind catcher towers are planned in this manner. Of course, this picture is all from one side. So the other side of this towers is blocked. So this openings face the wind direction. So the wind basically, so it's basically virtually trying to trap the wind into this. So the wind is trapped, and this wind through these towers is brought down to the heart of the building, and combined with canals or water canal, as I mentioned below earth, this can create cool wind movements through the spaces that are passing over water, causing evaporation. At times, when there is no access to the canal or the water source, this can still act as a solar chimney without adding anything. Simply when the air gets warm due to the occupants or the equipment or for whatever reasons when the spaces are being used at the lower level, is bound to rise up. So if we allow or create a scope for that air to exit at a higher level, this will so the cool air will rush in splits. So there will always be a temperature difference. So if there is a certain, as the air is getting warmed up in the building, it keeps rising. So these are very effectively used in parts of Middle East, especially in Iran. Also, some examples, some of the contemporary buildings in parts of Gujarat and also I think Rajasthan has experimented with it. And they have found, we got some very positive results. One of the very interesting set of structures it exists in a small town called D. It was built by Jat Raja Surajmal of Bharatpur. He was always fascinated by the Mughals and their architecture and the gardens of Mughal, what is called Charbagh. So he created a palace with huge lake. Bharatpur does have some available lakes, and that's why there's also a bird sanctuary. So the palace forms a quadrangle with the garden and walkway at the center, as you can see. Flower beds, shrubs, trees, and fountains cool the place considerably during the summer. Two large tanks, one is called Gopal Sagar, another is called Roop Sagar, on either side, help to bring down the temperature. So this is year round. I mean, the year round there is water here. There is another very interesting building called Keshav Bhavan, which is more like a monsoon pavilion where the ruler spent his afternoon or sort of interacted with his subjects. It's a single-story structure placed on an octagonal base. An arcade runs around the pavilion, again over a canal and hundreds of fountains. You can see some of the fountains in the along the walkway. The walls of canals are also pierced with hundreds of minute jets. So it is said that they employed bullocks with large buckets to draw water to the tank through a complex pulley system. So the water was drawn through this. Also during the Holi festival, color are added to the water and fountains spouted colored water, fountain spray and jet, creating almost monsoon-like ambience. There's also one of the structures here that is supposed to have some stone spheres placed on top of the roof, and it is said that the water was pushed with a pressure, and those spheres, the stone spheres of different sizes, moved around and created a rumble-like effect, like the sound of thunder inside the space. So that is why it was called the monsoon pavilion. Some of the other visuals, you can see the Holi festival being celebrated. I believe this is still practiced even now. I mean, every year, I think, as you can see, like multiple jets, water sources all around. Another interesting feature, although this is less architecture, it has more to do with the source of water, that is step wells or bowlies, which are also widely distributed around north and western region in India. Predominantly, these are reservoirs or natural wells for storage and access of water year round, irrespective of seasonal changes. They may be single or multiple level structures reached by a series of steps descending up to the natural water level. Step wells are considered sacred spaces and often flanked with temples. Water is sacred. In India, water is always considered sacred. I think more need to do it more now. Apart from merely being source of supply of water. But these places, as you have seen some of the examples, they also serve as space for social gathering and religious functions. Since the base of well provided relief from daytime heat, some of the baulis are large, elaborate, monumental architectural marvels consisting of multi-layered steps, pavilions, platforms, carved, decorated pillars, projections, and canopies. One of the largest structures called Rani Ki Vav, located in Patan, is a listed UNESCO Heritage Monument. Some of these, as you can see, they're almost like built like temples. There are multiple levels. So because these areas are cool, the environments are cool, so people sit around, they are able to gather and perhaps also form certain religious functions. The one below could be almost like a water temple. Look at the amount of carving, look at the kind of highly decorated carved pillars. So here we see the multiple effects, like a courtyard effect, like an atrium effect, and like evaporative water, apart from also serving the function of water storage and source of water. The one on the right, also very interesting really. Some of these do exist in and around Delhi and also parts of Rajasthan, parts of Gujarat. So we have seen that how in traditional times, most of the, whether in India or in the Middle East, parts of India, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Delhi, how various experiments to facilitate cooling without the use of many mechanical devices or electricity, since electricity was not there, and attempts are made to control environment and have cooling comforts, whether it was a palace or it was a building or a building or it was a public place. So I hope this will create some awareness for us to see that whether there is learning in it for us, for our future creation, as well as understanding of how natural processes without input of high energy in terms of cost, as well as adding to the carbon footprint, can create comfort, improve living conditions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was really a fabulous enlightenment regarding the traditional process of procedure of cooling. Thank you so much. And if time allows, we'll quickly take a few questions. So if there are any questions, you can raise up your hand or either drop in the chat box. So questions are welcome.
Thanks a lot, sir, for such a wonderful presentation. There is one question from my side. Can we utilize the same tower for as a wind catcher and also as a solar tower heater?
Can you just repeat the question? You know, the audio is little.
My question is, sir, can we use a same tower structure as a wind catcher and as a solar heater?
Yes, you can use those as solar heaters also, because the temperature difference. The thing is that heating requires high temperature. So you may have high temperature during the daytime. So it is possible to trap that heat and store. And so it's basically reverse of cooling process. So there have been attempts to trap that heat and also use them as part of Earth's tunnel, you know, like the geothermal energy as we call it. So some experiments have been done, but most of the time this requires very large infrastructures. So not very common these days. Any other question?
So if there's any other question, you can raise your hand or maybe unmute yourself or drop it on the chat box. So, okay, I don't see a further question. So, as we approach to the end, now may I request Ms. Jasleen Kaur to deliver her vote of thanks as a formal closure of this event. Please, ma'am.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Myself, architect planner Jasleen Kaur from MRS PTU Bathinda. And I would like to extend my thanks on behalf of our institute to all the dignitaries present over here. Mr. Ravish Mehra ji, Premchand Memorial Trust members, respected Jatinder Malik ji, Madam Payal, all the faculty members and dear students, thanks a lot for your presence over here. Thank you, Ravish ji, for sharing such a valuable things, the topic with us. Thanks a lot. And moreover, we are looking forward for the similar collaborations in future too. Thanks a lot, the IGBC team. Thank you very much.
So thanks for, would like to thank all participants for joining. And I hope that there are some gains and some more future learning. So best of all for everyone. And thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, IGB.